Hello and welcome to a presentation on the data leak for company M57. This is part of the assessment 3 for the digital forensics unit. Now, the information that's presented inside this document is fictional, and there is no factual information involved in this one. Welcome to my data leak presentation. This is on company M57, an investigation into what happened with the data leak. Now, during the process, I will cover off a number of things. I'll go over what the case is and what the information we're trying to identify, the flow of the investigation, some of the evidence collected, the chain of custody, areas that were reviewed, then move into findings and show some of the evidence that was collected as well as a conclusion. Now, on the overview of the case, you as the board has requested that we investigate what happened to expose some confidential information. The confidential information that was exposed was an Excel document related to some salaries and social security numbers. So we've created a case for this. Now, the case has been given an identification number of 2008M57G. An image has already been taken to the workstation, and we'll go through the process of doing that. The investigation flow used. First thing we do is we create an image of the disk. This was already done and provided to us. That information is then copied up to a secure server, and we then use that server. Okay, the next stage is the investigator, myself in this matter, grabs a copy of that image, takes it down to a virtual machine running Ubuntu in this case, and we then run a software called Autopsy. Now, this is a diagnostic software that allows us to interrogate information about the disks, the file system, and all the information that we can find off that disk. We review it as an environment and look to see what we can find. We then export and capture any evidence we find, create a report, which you already have a copy of, and we start the validation of the data. Then once we finish that, we close out the report, and then we do the final presentation, which is what we're doing now. So the evidence collected was a hard disk. So it was then collected using a tool we use, expert witness file format. And expert witness file format is a containerization format. So it creates a container. Inside that container, there's a number of meta objects that tell us about the case information, who was there. It also creates an MD5 hash. So as part of the transport and collection of this evidence, we have the MD5 hash that's created as part of the gathering process. We also have a SHA-256 hash that we create on the files before we ship them anywhere. This allows us to validate the files when we transport them, and then we can use the MD5 to validate the contents files as still correct as well. As part of the investigation, we need to maintain chain of custody as well. So this is done. We have a document that's included in the report of a table which actually outlines who collected what information and where it's stored, some hash information, and what happens with it. So as we move through the stages, the file is then collected from a server down to the virtual machine where we perform the investigation. We then perform a SHA-256 process against it, right, and validate that file. Now, you can see here in this table, we actually have the SHA-256 against each file. So files are downloaded on the 15th, and then they were interrogated, first of all, verified with the SHA-256. I have included the steps we used for that inside the report, so you can see those. Once the investigation was finished, the files that were on the actual Ubuntu machine were then destroyed. And the areas we focused on was, first of all, the operating system, confirming who owned the machine, what the machine was. The second area was file system, looked around the file system, trying to find, first of all, the Excel document, but then any other type of miscellaneous file that may cause the problems. Next area was onto the applications, looking at applications that have been installed on the machine, trying to work out whether there was a possibility that someone had actually hacked into the machine and put in this remote access toolkit or something on that machine to get files off. Then we look at USB devices, another clear entry point into machine. There's someone plugging a USB key into a machine, so check out those to see what we could find, see if there was anything in there. The last two areas we looked at were around the internet access, to see what sites the user, in this case Jean, had accessed. And then finally is emails, just a general email flow, trying to work out whether the file was either sent or someone put some sort of miscellaneous virus or something into the machine, or malware into the machine through email. Now, what we found as we went through this, so I created a timeline as well as a description of what we found through the process. This is a condensed version. There is more information in the report that goes into other detailed areas around these. So the timeline of events started around the 18th. There was an installation of an AIM instant messenger. Wasn't too much happening with that one. It was mostly used for chatter just between Jean and Alice. The second one was Jean was trying to get some confirmation around which email addresses. There was a bit of a confusion between Alex and Alison for Alison's email addresses. So once that had been worked out as Alison, which we confirmed, we then noticed that Jean received a request for some private information. It appeared to come from Alison, but it looked like it had a return path of Simon's G at a different domain. Then we see that as we move down further on, there's a confirmation that Alison should be using Alison at m57.biz as an email address. Then we can see Jean was starting to use Firefox as a browser. This is where we thought maybe there was an issue with something kind of a virus or a browser. So we checked that out. Nothing related to the web activity at that point, nothing related to browser activity. The USB device was then connected to the machine. We didn't see any file system associated with that. This is where the investigation started to pick up traction. So when we came here, this is where we found an Excel file. And this Excel file was actually on the desktop of Jean's. This Excel file matched the evidence that was provided for the file. As she was communicating, we noticed that there was some background checking emails coming through, and there was a request to do a background check from investors. This email that came through for that, and I'll show you the email in a second, actually contained a spoofed email address for Alison. The email address it was actually going to send to was tuckgeorge@gmail.com. So Jean did not know about this and actually emailed the Excel document to what she thought was Alison. Instead, it went to tuckgeorge. And then the later events that happened was one of the programmers, Bob, confirmed that he had information leaked and requested Jean to confirm it, and Jean confirmed that yes, her information had been leaked as well. So if we go on and look at the email evidence, so I provided 2 slides in here that'll show this information. The first one is showing the email that she received. This is an email that she received, appears to be from Alison, but it's actually from that tuckgeorge email address. And this is basically saying that they're sorry to bother you, but there's one of the VC guys is trying to do background checks and needed some information about people, which included names, salary, social security numbers. So Alison, at this stage, looking in the GUI, didn't notice that any of that information was there. You can see down here that the email address is from Alison, so it looks correct. So when we look down, we can see then that Jean did actually reply to the message. So here is the replied message where Jean has said, yes, I've attached the Excel document and provided it. And you can see here that we have identified an attachment, and the attachment is from the Excel document that was being sent across. So in conclusion, the data leak was due to human error. Now, Jean Jones was working with Alison over instant messaging and email. It was about onboarding of new staff. So it was a good scenario that there was someone actually after a background check of people. Startup company looking for new staff members, possibly could happen. A couple of things that came out wrong here. Firstly, yes, spoofed email address, hard for Jean to tell what it was. Second point, salary information, social security numbers should not be emailed just to anybody. There's a problem there and a breakdown of that. So with that in mind, continued to look through the system and couldn't find any evidence that anybody had actually gained access to their company resources. So what we're recommending is, one is personal information should not be sent via email, should have a secure delivery method set up for it, a protected server or something that will encrypt it before it sends it, or something that will actually serve the information as an encrypted format. Next one is staff need to be able to validate the email. Training should be provided for the staff to identify these emails. Last one is the system configuration of your mail service should be updated. So an SPF record, a DMAC record, and DKM record. So these records are designed to protect email services. So the sender provider framework is the one that actually checks to see if the domain's allowed to sell. So there's DKIM, and one is validation that you own the domain. That wraps up the presentation. If there's any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you.